I wanted to share a little bit about our story and how we got here and where we're going. And as much as possible, I'd like to actually use the Sri Singh Sahib's words. So if you'll forgive me, I'm actually going to read some things while I'm talking here. But the story actually begins on January 5th, 1961. And January 5th, 1961, Sri Singh Sahib, Yogi Bhajan said, the planet Uranus started projecting its rays through the moon. And the moon represents the mind. And vibrationally, what started happening was people's minds started expanding. This went on for 9 years. What happened was young people started to resist authority. Young people started growing their hair. Young people started smoking marijuana. Young people started doing all sorts of things, bugging their parents, questioning, you know, why should I live in this box? I want to be bigger than this. And what's interesting is that this wasn't a conscious process. This was the light of the planet Uranus actually coming through the moon. This went on for 9 years. And Yogi Bhajan said that Uranus actually has a different rotation than the other planets. It rotates in the opposite direction. So this awakening of consciousness is coming from the west to the east. Where the sun rotates from the east to the west, this process is happening from the west to the east. And it was a global process. I want to talk a little bit about what Yogi Bhajan called the Woodstock Nation, because again, these people started revolting, and we think of this as the old hippie era, and it's past us and it's gone and all that. Yogi Bhajan saw this as absolutely a cosmic, earth-shaking event. And I want to read some of the quotes here because as I delved into this, it actually blew my mind. He said, people mock at that era as a Woodstock time. Woodstock Nation that has only one thing great ever happened on this planet, and that's the Woodstock Nation. At every level and range, 20 million young people decided they would effectively work in a very calm, peaceful manner, sacrificing their total self, but shall bring change to the country consciousness. He says, we have come out of the greatest human sacrifice this planet has ever made. There was 20 million youthful, beautiful, wonderful, logical, well-living, well-built Americans who revolted in the 60s. We remember them with the name of Woodstock Nation. People say one sacrifice works wonders. I'm telling you how much sacrifice has been made, and human sacrifice. Never in the history of man has such a silent sacrifice ever been made, and will never, ever be made again. America as a whole nation went through changes. It affected Canada. It affected South America. It affected the entire surroundings. I have seen with mine own eyes and in my own experience 19 million young people, sons and daughters of this soil, laying their life without even knowing what was the cosmic force which was guiding them into that infinity. They are the true heroes. They were the true leaders. They were crucified by society. They were burned at the stake of the ego of the government of the United States. They were claimed to be drug addicts, dirty people, flower children, hopeless, rude, out of society, out of manners, and everything else. When I came to this country, I saw nothing else. It brought tears to my eyes. I saw many Jesus Christs going through those crises themselves, and I saw Christ being nailed on every cross. The most innocent inner voice of the age of Aquarius, which these young people took upon themselves, and their main question was asked, who are you? Why are you doing this? All they could say is, we don't know. It may look to people like no history, but this is the history which shall rule the 5,000 years of the Aquarian Age. This is the history which will be based on the blood and sacrifice of those souls who shook America. That Woodstock nation were the basic root cause of that evolution which the United States bears on its forehead as a mark of victory. They laid their lives down, but they won. They killed them, but they lost. This is the age of Aquarius. Time has begun. Only those who shall know their God, their soul, their self, shall volunteer to extend themselves to others, volunteer to come out to uplift others, also uplifting themselves, shall enter the age of Aquarius. So it's funny to me because when I first read this, I thought 20 million people sacrificed themselves, or 20 million people rose up, 19 million sacrificed themselves. 19 million. You know, you don't read about that in the newspapers. You don't see that on CNN. Well, this information has been suppressed, and it's on a lot of different levels. How many of you, know people back in the 60s and 70s who overdosed on drugs, who died? How many of you know people who ended up in mental institutions, who committed suicide? How many of you know people who had a spirit and gave it up? If you think of us as we're light beings here in a human body, what does it mean to give up that spirit and just to live in the material world? It means to commit suicide on a spiritual level. And what Yogi Bhajan is saying, that 20 million of us caught this energy of Uranus, of Aquarius, rose up, changed the world. Only 1 million survived. And that million, we're sitting here as part of it. 19 million were sacrificed, willingly sacrificed to change the vibration of the entire world. So this was, this blew my mind. If we move forward a little bit, just to give an idea of where we are right now and the dates that we're dealing with. We started out in 1961. In 1991, November 11th, 1991, Yogi Bhajan said that the axle of the Earth had changed, had shifted 0.9 degrees, and that the Earth was in fact turning slower than it had before. And he announced that this was in fact the beginning of the cusp period, that transition from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. This cusp would run for 21 years, and it would end on November 11th, 2011 at, he said, both 11:30 and he also said 11 a.m. LA time. This transition period, he called it 3 periods, 3 cusps, that were going one after the other, 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. He called it changes, different dimensions of the change. He said that the first 7 years were the computer age. The second 7 years was the information age. And the third 7 years was going to be the age of the mind. And then that would move into the sensory age. He also described this as 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, and 1 year, talking about the incredible intensity that people would experience mentally during this time. Because if we sit here and think about, okay, age of Aquarius, we have all of these things, no more governments, no more wars, no more jobs that I hate, no more, all of these different things. Doesn't really feel like that right now. I don't know about you, but it kind of feels like the old stuff. Well, this is the interesting thing. My understanding of it, after I've kind of gone through and read and read and reread, is that what's happened during this 21-year period is that the vibrations have changed. And if you think about the old adage, as above, so below, first things have to change on the vibrational level. Then they change on the physical level. And what's happened over this 21 years is that the intensity, the vibrational frequency of the entire Earth has changed. And this has affected people's minds. It's basically like putting more and more electricity through a motor, and at some point, something goes like that. And really the only way to handle this increased intensity is really through Kundalini Yoga. That's why, again, we're here doing that. He has a model for psychic frequency. That's everything from 0.0 to 3.5. And what he's saying is that every year during this period, this frequency has raised 1 decimal point. And so what's happened is that the psychic intensity of life has increased during this 21-year period. We're just finishing that process now. So what's next? The next big date is 2038, and what he calls this is the transition period. So in a way we're saying, okay, are we there yet? Well, yes, on a cosmic level, we have a little bit longer to go, because all of this vibrational change that's been going on for 21 years now has to manifest in the physical. And that's going to take between now and 2038. And 2038, he says, at that point, we have everything we need. At that point, we're done. At that point, everything will have changed. So all of the kind of earth changes and climate changes and all of these things that people have been talking about as needing to happen, those are starting now. And let me just give you a couple of things he said, because it's fun to see here. He says at 11 a.m. Los Angeles time, the guards will change and hand over and take over. So in other words, what he's saying is, this is the new time starting now. He calls this the age of Guru Nanak. It starts today. Today starts the age of Guru Nanak. And he says, he's talking about starting in 1990, 50 years, the elementary change of the axial power will happen, changing the wavelength of all frequencies, including all currents of the ocean and all that they affect. And that effect is what you see today shall be different. We're entering an era within this next 5 decades. We have not only to transform ourselves, but also teach our little children how to survive under heavy pressures of the atmosphere, of the environments, and of the personal emotional self. That is the change of the era according to this time and space. There shall be nothing outside of you but pain, poison, and perpetual what you call is depression. It is not the time of the Sikh religion yet. This he's talking in 1976. To that prophecy, the religion of Nanak should start taking ground in the world in 2011. So what we're going to be seeing in the manifest world, the physical world, is a great deal of change, a great deal of insanity, a great deal of mental pressure. And what our challenge is to take this technology that we've been taught and teach it and share it as the way to transcend that, to raise one's frequency to that frequency that the earth wants to vibrate. And essentially what he's saying is, from now on, the prophecy of Guru Gobind Singh, 960 million will happen after 2038. That the technology of Kundalini Yoga, of the Shabad Guru, of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, is what will actually carry people into this new age. So, thank you very much. I enjoyed sharing.